3 years after my husband cheated on me and threw me out, he stood trembling in front of me inside his billionaire boss's office, because I had become the boss's wife. But before that happened, I was once the woman who begged him to love me. The alarm went off at 4:47 in the morning, and Zara was already awake. She had been lying in the dark for 20 minutes, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sound of her husband breathing beside her. Deep, steady, unbothered. Marcus slept the way a man sleeps when he has no worries, and back then, Zara believed that was because of her. Because she carried enough for both of them. Because she made sure he never had to worry about anything. She slipped out of bed quietly, pulling the covers back over his shoulder before she left. That was Zara. Even half asleep, even exhausted, she was still tucking someone else in. By 5:15, she had already started a load of laundry, packed Marcus's lunch, and was standing over a hot stove making his breakfast before the sun had fully decided to rise. She worked as an administrative coordinator at a mid-size healthcare firm downtown. The pay was decent, not impressive, but it was consistent. And consistency, Zara had always believed, was how love was supposed to feel. Steady, reliable, present. She poured his coffee exactly the way he liked it. 2 sugars. A splash of oat milk. Stirred 3 times. She knew her husband down to the smallest detail, and she had believed for 6 years that he knew her the same way. "You're up early again," Marcus said, appearing in the kitchen doorway in his work shirt, already halfway buttoned. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a jaw that always looked like it was holding something back. He had a handsomeness that turned heads, the kind that made Zara feel proud when they walked into a room together. She used to think that pride was mutual. "I wanted to make sure you ate before your presentation," she said, sliding the plate onto the counter. He glanced at it. "I might just grab something at the office." "Marcus, you always say that, and then you don't eat until 2. He said nothing. He picked up his coffee, scrolled his phone, and stood there like she wasn't in the room. That had started happening more and more lately. The silence that wasn't peaceful. The kind with edges. Marcus worked as a senior operations manager at Shin Global Enterprises, one of the most powerful private investment firms in the city. The company was owned and run by a man named Jay, a Korean billionaire who had built his empire from the ground up before his 40th birthday. Jay was known for being sharp, private, and completely uninterested in anything that wasn't exceptional. Marcus had been with the company for 4 years and spoke about his boss with a mixture of ambition and anxiety that Zara always found quietly unsettling. "Jay doesn't keep people who don't perform," Marcus told her often. "I have to stay sharp." "You are sharp," she would always answer. And she meant it, even when he stopped saying thank you, even when the compliments dried up, even when he began treating her encouragement like background noise. She still meant it, because that was what Zara had been taught love looked like. Her mother had worked double shifts and still had dinner ready. Her grandmother had loved a difficult man for 40 years and called it devotion. Zara had inherited that blueprint without ever questioning whether it was worth keeping. Her best friend Jade had been in her life since college. Jade was the kind of woman who filled every room she entered, light-skinned, sharp-tongued, and magnetic in a way that Zara had always quietly admired rather than envied. Or so she thought. Jade came around often, sometimes too often, dropping by the apartment with wine and opinions, usually opinions about Marcus. "He's just stressed, Zara. Men get like this when they're under pressure at work. You have to give him space. You might be smothering him without realizing it. Not every distant phase means something is wrong." Zara had always received this advice with gratitude. Jade knew Marcus too. Jade had been there from the beginning. It made sense that she would defend him. But lately, small things had started to snag at Zara's attention the way a loose thread snags on a ring. The way Jade laughed a little too easily at Marcus's jokes. The way her eyes sometimes tracked him across the room when she thought no one was looking. The way she once grabbed his wrist to look at his new watch and held on for just a second too long. The way her phone lit up during dinner last Thursday, and when Zara glanced over, Jade flipped it face down before she could see the screen. Small things. The kind you dismiss because the alternative is too heavy to hold. The perfume started about 2 months ago. The first time, Zara noticed it on his collar. Something floral and unfamiliar, and not the kind that comes from a crowded elevator. She told herself it was a client meeting. A work event. She folded the shirt and put it away. The second time, she found it on his jacket. She stood in the laundry room for a long moment, holding the fabric to her nose, her chest tightening in a way she refused to name. She put it in the wash. She stopped asking where he had been when he came home late. Not because she stopped wondering, but because she was terrified of the answer. Marcus had become a man she had to be careful around in her own home. He snapped at small things. He criticized the way she organized the cabinets, the volume of the television, the way she asked how his day went. "Why do you always have to pry?" he said one evening. "I'm not prying. I'm asking. It feels the same." She had gone to bed that night reminding herself that he was stressed. That good marriages had hard seasons. That she had made a promise, and promises meant something. She still believed that then. It was a Thursday afternoon when the rain started coming down hard against the city windows, and Zara left work 2 hours early with a slight fever and an ache behind her eyes. She thought about calling Marcus to let him know she was heading home. She decided to surprise him instead. She could make soup. They could watch something together. Maybe they needed a quiet evening to remember what they were. She unlocked the apartment door and stepped inside. The lights in the hallway were on, and from behind the closed bedroom door, she heard a woman laughing. Zara's hand touched the bedroom door and pushed it open slowly. She told herself it was nothing. A visitor. A phone call on speaker. Something she could explain away and fold neatly into the drawer with everything else she had been folding away for months. But there are some things you cannot unfold once you see them. Marcus was not alone. And the woman sitting up in Zara's bed, wearing Zara's sheets, with her hair loose and her expression shifting from laughter to shock, was Jade. Jade. The silence that followed lasted only a few seconds. But Zara felt every single one of them move through her body like cold water. Her handbag slipped from her shoulder. Her keys hit the floor. She could not speak. She could not move. She just stood there while the fever she had come home with suddenly felt like the least painful thing in the room. "Zara," Jade started. "Don't." It came out as a whisper. Marcus was already sitting up, jaw tight, eyes hard. Not guilty. Not ashamed. Just irritated. Like she had walked in and interrupted something important. And that look, that specific look, broke something in Zara that she was never fully able to repair. If this story is hitting different, you already know what to do, like share and drop a comment below. Let's keep going. "How long?" Zara asked. Her voice was shaking, but she needed to know. Marcus exhaled like the question bored him. "Zara, let's not do this right now." "How long, Marcus?" 8 months. Jade said it quietly, like she was confessing in church. Like volume would determine how much guilt she carried. 8 months. Zara had been waking up at 4:47 every morning for 8 months. Packing lunches. Ironing shirts. Stirring coffee 3 times. For 8 months she had been loving a man who was spending those same months loving her best friend. She started to cry. Not loudly. The silent kind that comes from somewhere too deep for noise. And then Marcus stood up and said the thing that changed everything. "This is exactly the problem with you, Zara. You make everything so emotional." She looked at him. "I'm standing in my own bedroom. My bedroom. My name is on this lease. Marcus, you've been boring for years." He said it flatly, cleanly, like a door closing. "You stopped growing. You stopped being interesting. You just became comfortable, and you expected that to be enough." Jade looked at the floor. At least she had the decency for that. "You were holding me back," Marcus continued. "I need someone who matches where I'm going. Not someone still stuck at where we started." Zara wiped her face. "I paid half these bills while you were climbing. And I'm grateful. But gratitude isn't love, Zara." Jade finally stood. "I never wanted it to happen this way." "Then how did you want it to happen?" Zara turned to her. "You sat in my kitchen. You drank my tea. You told me I was smothering him. You were covering for yourself." Jade's expression shifted. The guilt hardened into something close to defensiveness. "You two were already falling apart before I." "Stop talking." Zara said it quietly. "Please just stop talking." The argument grew louder after that. Loud enough that she heard the neighbor's television go silent on the other side of the wall. Loud enough that someone knocked once and then thought better of it. Marcus said it without flinching. "Leave my house if you can't accept reality." And reality, Zara realized, was that she had built her entire life inside someone else's name. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. This story is just getting started. She left that evening with a duffel bag, her work laptop, and the flat shoes she had been wearing since morning. She called her mother first. "Come home," her mother said. Then after a pause, "But Zara, marriage is not something you walk away from easily. Have you prayed? Have you tried?" She hung up gently. She loved her mother too much to be angry at her. Her cousin let her sleep on a couch for 2 weeks before the boyfriend complained. A church she used to attend allowed her to stay in a back room for 3 nights before she felt too ashamed to return. She sold her good earrings. She skipped meals she pretended she wasn't hungry for. She sat in parking lots and cried in ways she never allowed anyone to witness. Friends she thought were hers turned out to be theirs. They stopped calling one by one until the silence on her phone became its own kind of company. She had never felt more alone. But somewhere inside the loneliness, something small and stubborn refused to die. It didn't feel like strength yet. It felt more like stubbornness, like a woman who had survived too much to give Marcus the satisfaction of finishing her. "I will survive first," she told herself one night, sitting on the edge of a cot with $10 in her account and rain hitting the window. Everything else comes after. 3 weeks later, she was in a library using the free Wi-Fi, sending out job applications to anything that would take her, when a listing stopped her mid-scroll. Executive support staff. Luxury firm. Competitive salary. Immediate hire. The company name meant nothing to her. She applied without thinking twice. She did not know, could not have known, that the firm belonged to Hyun, her husband's billionaire boss, the most powerful and private man in the city. She had just knocked on a door she didn't know existed. The job listing had said executive support staff. What it meant was that Zara would be mopping floors by 6 in the morning. She found out on her first day when the supervisor handed her a uniform, pointed at a cleaning cart, and walked away without making eye contact. There had been a miscommunication with the agency, apparently. The assistant position had already been filled. But they needed someone for building maintenance, and she could start immediately if she wanted. She took the uniform, found a bathroom to change in, and started mopping before she allowed herself to feel anything about it. Shin Global Enterprises occupied the top 14 floors of one of the most expensive buildings in the city. Everything inside it was deliberate. The marble floors, the low lighting in the executive corridors, the way even the air seemed to behave differently up there. Zara learned the building floor by floor, cart by cart, and she did her work quietly and completely without complaint. The other cleaners were kind enough. But the junior office staff were not always so kind. "Careful," a young woman in heels said one morning as Zara wrung out a mop near the elevator bank. "Some of us have important places to be." Zara moved the cart without a word. "She's always so quiet," someone said loudly enough to be heard. "Probably doesn't speak much English." Zara spoke 3 languages. She kept mopping. What none of them knew, what Zara herself did not yet know, was that 2 floors above her in the operations department, Marcus came to work every single day, walking past the same elevator she cleaned, breathing the same air, living inside the same building where she was now starting over from the very bottom. If you're feeling this story, like and subscribe right now. You do not want to miss what's coming. It was a Tuesday evening, 3 weeks into the job, when Zara found the envelope. She was cleaning the executive boardroom after a late meeting. The long table had been cleared but not thoroughly, and tucked beneath a leather chair was a thick envelope. She picked it up and looked inside. Cash, a significant amount, and beneath it, folded neatly, a set of documents with a company seal she recognized as Hyun's private holding firm. She stood there alone in that room for a long moment. Nobody would have known. The cameras in the boardroom had been temporarily disabled for the confidential meeting earlier. She had overheard someone mention it. No footage. No witnesses. Just Zara and an envelope full of more money than she had seen in months. She thought about her empty account. She thought about the cot. She thought about the earrings she had already sold. Then she carried the envelope directly to the night security desk and signed her name on the handover log. Hyun reviewed the security report the next morning because something about the night log caught his assistant's attention. A cleaning staff member had returned a significant sum of cash and a set of sensitive acquisition documents. No camera footage from inside the boardroom. No witnesses. Just a name on a log and a woman who had no reason to do the right thing except that it was right. He pulled her employment file. Zara, 31 years old. Hired through a staffing agency 3 weeks ago. Sparse work history for her age. A gap that suggested something difficult had happened. No emergency contact listed. He watched her the next morning from the corridor without introducing himself. She was wiping down the lobby glass, working with a steadiness that looked less like a job and more like discipline. The kind that comes from a person holding themselves together through sheer will. He found himself curious in a way that had nothing to do with business. It started small. A container of food left at the cleaning station with no note. Zara assumed it was a mistake the first time and left it untouched. The second time there was a sticky note that said simply, "You work long hours." She ate it in the stairwell because she was too proud to be seen receiving kindness and too hungry to refuse it. One evening he was in the corridor when she came to collect her cart, and he spoke to her directly for the first time. "You've been here over a month," he said. She straightened. "Yes, sir." "Do you like the work?" She considered lying. "I'm grateful for the work." He nodded like that answer told him more than a yes would have. "What did you do before this?" "Administration. Healthcare sector." "Why did you leave?" A pause. "My life changed." He didn't push. He simply said good night and walked back toward his office. But the following week he asked his head of administration to quietly evaluate whether there were any internal openings more suited to her background. What followed were small conversations. Brief. Never personal enough to make her uncomfortable. He asked about her opinions on things. Systems. Organization. The way the building's scheduling could be improved. He listened to her answers with a focus that she had almost forgotten was possible. Not the listening that waits for its turn to speak. Real listening. For the first time in longer than she could remember, someone was actually hearing her. It frightened her a little. She had forgotten what that felt like and confused it with weakness. It was a quiet Friday evening, and the floor was nearly empty when he stopped beside the window where she was working and looked out at the city below them. "You carry something heavy," he said. Not an accusation. Just an observation. She didn't answer immediately. Then, without looking at her, he asked it softly. "Who hurt you this badly?" Zara's hand stopped moving against the glass. And for the first time since the night she walked out with a duffel bag and flat shoes, her eyes filled with tears she could not explain away. She didn't answer him that Friday evening. She just pressed her lips together, nodded once like she was thanking him for something, and pushed her cart down the corridor without looking back. But the question followed her home. "Who hurt you this badly?" She lay awake that night turning it over. Not because she didn't know the answer, but because nobody had ever asked. Not her mother. Not her cousins. Not the church women who advised endurance. Everyone had focused on the marriage. On saving it. On surviving it. Nobody had stopped to ask about her. About the specific wound. About who exactly had pressed the knife in and how deep it had gone. Hyun had asked. And something about that undid her in a way she wasn't prepared for. She told him the following week. Not all of it. Not at once. They were in his office after hours. She had been asked to reorganize the document storage room adjacent to it, and he had offered her tea the way he always did now. Quietly, without making it feel like charity. She told him about Marcus. About 6 years. About the 4:47 mornings and the lunches and the coffee stirred 3 times. About Jade. About standing in the doorway of her own bedroom and watching her best friend look back at her from inside her sheets. About being told she was boring. That she was holding him back. That gratitude wasn't love. About the duffel bag and the flat shoes and the parking lot crying. Hyun listened without interrupting. Without offering solutions. Without checking his phone. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment, and then he said simply, "He was a fool." She almost laughed. It was so direct. So clean. No lecture attached to it. "I believed in him," she said. "That says everything good about you and nothing good about him. This story isn't slowing down, like subscribe and share so you're ready for the finale. Let's go." What grew between them after that was not rushed. Hyun was not a man who chased. He was a man who decided. And once he decided that Zara deserved to be treated like someone worth keeping, he was consistent in a way that she had only ever been consistent for other people. He arranged for her to be transferred internally to an administrative coordination role. Her actual skill set. Her actual experience. She protested once, and he told her the department needed her specific abilities and moved on like it was purely professional. She let him have that. He enrolled her in a leadership development program the company offered senior staff. She came home from the first session with pages of notes and eyes that were alive in a way they hadn't been in years. He noticed. He said nothing. He just ensured she was registered for the next one. Trust built the way trust does when nobody is rushing it. Slowly. Quietly. With small proofs that stacked up until she stopped waiting for something to go wrong. The peace was what surprised her most. There was no walking on eggshells. No monitoring his mood before she could determine her own. No shrinking herself to fit the space he was willing to give her. Hyun treated her like a woman with a full interior life, and he was simply glad to be near it. She fell carefully, the way a person falls when they've been hurt badly enough to pay attention on the way down. 2 floors below, Marcus was unraveling. The pressure at work had been mounting for months. Targets he was missing. Reports that came back flagged. A supervisor who had begun copying his manager on every correction. He came home short-tempered, and Jade received it the way Zara once had, quietly, making excuses, adjusting herself around his moods. The difference was that Jade knew exactly who he was. She had helped him become this. And that knowledge sat between them like something rotting. Their relationship had begun to curdle. Arguments that started over small things and ended in territory that could not be taken back. Trust issues from 2 people who had built their beginning on betrayal. The money he had promised her hadn't materialized. The life he had painted was still mostly paint. He thought about Zara sometimes. Not with love. With something closer to unease. The particular discomfort of a man who knows he discarded something real. Then came the morning everything shifted. Marcus received a message from his department head. He was needed upstairs. Executive floor. The old boardroom. He straightened his jacket in the elevator mirror. Whatever this was, he would handle it. He was good under pressure when it mattered. He pushed open the boardroom door with the confidence of a man who had no idea what was waiting for him. The room was arranged for a formal internal announcement. Senior department heads seated around the table. Hyun standing at the head of it, composed and unreadable as always. And beside him, seated with her back straight and her hands folded, wearing a charcoal dress and an expression of complete calm, was Zara. Marcus stopped walking. The door swung shut behind him, and he stood there while his mind tried to catch up with what his eyes were already telling him. She looked up and met his gaze and held it without flinching. No anger. No tears. Just a stillness that was somehow worse than either. He found his seat and sat down without a word. Hyun let the silence settle the way powerful men do. Then he spoke. I want to introduce someone important to this company. Most of you know her from her work in administration. What you don't know is that she is also important to me personally. Marcus's jaw tightened. Hyun placed his hand over Zara's and looked at the room. She is not just an asset to this company. A pause. She is my future wife. The room responded with warmth and applause. Marcus sat completely still while his past sat at the head of the table and his future quietly collapsed around him. Marcus came to her office on a Wednesday morning. He didn't knock properly. Just tapped twice and opened the door like he still had that right. Like 3 years of silence and 1 destroyed marriage was something you could step over on the way to an apology. Zara looked up from her desk. She had her own office now. Her name was on the door. Her schedule was full. I need 5 minutes, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she gestured to the chair across from her the way she would gesture to any other person who had requested a meeting. He sat down, and the confidence he had walked in with began to dissolve almost immediately. She watched it happen without satisfaction and without pain. Just observation. I made a mistake, he started. The biggest mistake of my life, and I know that now. Okay, she said. He blinked. He had expected more reaction. Zara, I'm serious. What Jade and I had, it's over. It's been over. She's not the person I thought she was, and Marcus. He stopped. I believe you, she said simply. I believe it's over. I believe she disappointed you. I believe you're sorry. He leaned forward slightly, something like hope moving across his face. But I need you to understand something. She set her pen down. My forgiveness is not a door back in. I forgave you a long time ago because carrying that was too heavy for me, not because you deserved it. Forgiving you was something I did for myself. He was quiet. You told me I was boring, she said. You told me I was holding you back. You told me gratitude wasn't love, and then you handed me a duffel bag and showed me the door. She said it without her voice breaking, without tears. I want you to know that I don't hate you for any of it. But I also want you to know that I am never, in this life, going back. If this story has moved you, share it right now. Someone needs to hear this today. He tried twice more after that. A note left at her assistant's desk. A message through a colleague. Each time the answer was the same. Gentle. Firm. Completely closed. The manipulation he attempted, the I still love you, the nobody will ever love you the way I did, landed differently on a woman who had rebuilt herself from a cot in a church back room. She heard the words and felt nothing except a quiet gratitude that she no longer needed them to be true. Jade's ending wrote itself. Marcus, being exactly who he had always been, had not changed simply because his target had. Within months of their relationship becoming public at the office, rumors began circulating. A junior staff member. Late evenings. The same pattern Zara had once folded into laundry and put away. Jade recognized every single sign because she had taught him that he could get away with it. She left. Quietly, then loudly, then in the kind of public embarrassment that spreads through an office building like weather. She lost the friendships she had built in that circle. She lost the version of herself she had constructed on top of someone else's marriage. Last Zara heard, she had moved back to her hometown. Zara did not celebrate this. But she did not mourn it either. Some things simply find their own level eventually. Marcus was quietly let go from Shin Global 4 months after the announcement. Performance-related, officially. The kind of exit that happens when a man spends more energy managing his shame than doing his job. On his last day, he passed Zara in the lobby. She was walking beside Hyun mid-conversation, her hand in his. She was laughing at something he had said, real laughter, the full kind that reaches the eyes. Marcus held the door open for them on his way out. She thanked him the way you thank a stranger. Warmly. Without weight. He stood on the pavement outside the building that used to define him and watched the door close. The wedding was small. Deliberately so. Hyun had offered her anything she wanted, and what she wanted was peace. A garden. 30 people. Food that tasted like something her mother would make. Music that didn't try too hard. He stood across from her under an arch of white flowers and looked at her the way she had once desperately wanted someone to look at her. Not like a possession. Not like a project. Like a person he had specifically, deliberately chosen. In his short speech he said, "She returned something valuable when she had every reason not to. That told me everything about who she was. I have spent every day since trying to be worthy of that kind of character." Zara's mother cried from the front row. Zara held it together until she didn't. And when the tears came, they were the clean kind. The kind that come after something is finally, truly over. She thought about everything sometimes. The 4:47 mornings. The coffee stirred 3 times. The duffel bag. The parking lot. The mop. She didn't think about it with bitterness. She thought about it the way you think about a road you had to travel to arrive somewhere worth being. Betrayal had broken her open. But broken open is not the same as broken. She had learned that what Marcus called boring was actually steadiness. What he called holding him back was actually loyalty. What he threw away was exactly what someone else had been looking for. Pain had not destroyed her destiny. It had redirected her to it. The same man who once threw me out for another woman eventually stood in line to greet me as his boss's wife. And I smiled at him like the stranger he had made himself. This is what I know now. Character opens doors that money cannot. Healing is greater than revenge. And the right person will never make you feel like you have to beg to be loved. You are not what they threw away. You are what they could not handle. Thank you for staying until the end. If this story meant something to you, comment, share, and subscribe. Every batch was written for someone who needed it.